Welcome to Tech Startup Stories, hosted by Natalie Binns. This is the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the B2B startup world.
Hi, I'm Natalie Binns, and I'm the host of Tech Startup Stories. This podcast is really designed to share the unique and challenging journeys of all the people that are building small startups to scale-ups in the tech space. My background, initially I was in sales and then I moved into marketing, and I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing tech companies. But my passion is really startups. And that led me back to helping tech startups set up their marketing and go-to-market functions where the budgets are tight and the resources are few and far between. So let's get into this week's podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast. This week, I'm speaking with Alex Boyce, and Alex and I met over a year ago. And at that time, Alex was in the UK. Thanks for joining, Alex. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Natalie. Appreciate it.
So Alex is the co-founder of a company called Fuzey, and they're a business that has been around for quite a number of years. Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Fuzey do?
Sure. So we founded Fuzey about 5 years ago with the vision and mission to help upskill, at the time, small businesses to better connect with their customers. In kind of the aftermath of COVID, we realized that customer expectations had changed, and people wanted to engage with local businesses in different ways. So we created an all-in-one inbox that aggregates all of your leads, customer communication, and basically any back and forth you have with a business all in one place. We connect across SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and email. But today our business looks a little different. I'm sure that's part of what we'll talk about over the next couple minutes. But today we actually work almost exclusively with automotive dealerships, basically on this topic. But fundamentally, we offer AI and messaging tools to really get into customer communication and associated workflows for dealerships. So what that means in practice today is we aggregate all of your leads. We help you better connect with your customers to convert those into sales and customer retention. And of course, we help you provide a better customer experience. We do that all through those same channels that I talked about. So anything that involves texting or anything like that. And we leverage AI to make that a really simple and seamless process. But I'm sure we'll cover a lot more. But yeah, basically, vertical SaaS and AI agents for automotive dealerships.
Got it. And you sort of said there's been a bit of a pivot over the time. You started out with a bit of a broader industry that you were going after. So what changed? What made you kind of narrow in on that particular industry, and why automotive?
Yeah, sure. So I think when we started out, we had kind of a grand, broader vision of horizontal dominance, right? We wanted to be all things to all people. My co-founder and I are both first-time founders. So what that means is that we didn't necessarily have the battle scars to see some of the advantages of horizontal and for industry level focus. So what we started doing is basically working across industries, and I mean our first customers were as broad as mechanics in the automotive space, all the way to electricians, plumbers, home trades, real estate agents, and basically everything under the sun. But ultimately, what we found is that horizontal engagement, or approach rather, was helpful in some ways, but also, I think trying to be all things to all people kind of left us with reasonably shallow engagement relative to what we were looking for. So, we helped, kind of deliver some value. So yes, text messages and WhatsApp in a kind of a structured, consolidated way is helpful for almost any business, but we didn't really kind of get to that next level of becoming the, key or core mechanism for these businesses to communicate. Um, and ultimately, with shallow engagement came longer sales cycles and just kind of a business that didn't work as robustly. That said, what we realized is that when we were working with dealerships, we saw more and more and more use, more and more value, and ultimately we decided to double down on that as a consequence. And from that, we were very fortunate that everything seemed to start clicking then. By going vertical, we could deeply integrate with other pieces of the kind of broader, automotive tech stack, which we can talk about in a bit. But what that meant is basically we could get more data to be more useful to our customers. We could tailor more of our workflows to be more specific and therefore more robust and more useful. and we could fundamentally speak the customer's language, right? We didn't have to necessarily sit there and try to, figure out how to position to a plumber and then the next call to an electrician, which I definitely got to do. And you're right, I'm not from the UK, but I sure got to know all of the different regional, variances across all of these different businesses and kind of nuances. And of course, now by kind of being a little bit more vertical, being a little bit more focused, we're just able to have a lot more speed and unlock more scale. So we basically were able to kind of turn our platform from a nice to have to something that's kind of much more mission critical. So that was the story.
That makes sense. But with the customers that you originally kind of started out with, how has that kind of transitioned over time? Are you still working with those companies? What's
Yeah, I
happening?
mean, those are our OG believers from day one. So we still, I mean, our first customers, I think started out paying us about $25 a month for 25 pounds a month. Um, we were fighting tooth and nail for each and every one of them. I think our ACVs now have, I mean, we're breaching about 1,000 pounds a month now. So obviously it's gone up pretty dramatically. So 40x difference. But of course we still, these guys were in our camp from day one, and we'll always support them. And frankly, I'm deeply grateful for them because they were able to unlock the next phase of our journey, which was a seed round that we did in December of 2021, which of course we can talk about. But a lot of those earliest believers were the guys who kind of went up to vouch for us in that process, and as a consequence, we'll always be grateful. But yeah, we still serve them. So our kind of customer set is very funny. You'll see a long tail of great robust dealership groups from across the UK, Ireland, the Middle East, and the US. And then you'll see a bunch of smaller, almost mom and pop shops across predominantly the UK and Ireland that we still serve. So it's a bit of a mix, but it keeps things interesting. But in terms of ongoing product innovation and focus, it's very much kind of centric around the automotive side.
So you mentioned that yourself and Henrik, your co-founder, your first time founders. How did you guys meet?
Yeah, so Henrik and I met well, I guess only a couple months before founding Fuzey, through a mutual friend of mine from my past life, which was investment banking. So a guy named Jan had kind of introduced us. He was also a founder in kind of the broader London tech ecosystem. He knew that both Henrik and I were kind of keen on founding a company. And he said that we had kind of complementary skill sets that could make that happen. We're both commercial founders, so neither of us have a tech background, which we could talk about kind of the ins and the outs of that. I think broadly speaking has been a really positive thing, but certainly earliest days trying to get initial tech talent to come join us was particularly challenging, and we've got plenty of scars to show for it. But yeah, we met through a mutual friend. We realized that we had kind of an aligned view of kind of what we wanted to build. Something that was fundamentally B2B based, but had kind of a consumer angle to it. And here we are. So it's been a journey. He's Danish, I'm American. We have fundamentally different approaches in so many ways, but I think that mutual challenge really has kind of boosted both of us to be better and more thoughtful as a result.
Absolutely. And you talked earlier about the fact that you went for a seed round in sort of 2021. In terms of that journey, what point did you guys talk about, we're going to either go bootstrapped, we're going to go for funding? What was that process like for you guys?
Yeah, yeah. So we founded Fusey in the first quarter of 2020, and very quickly within a couple weeks, raised a pre-seed round of 500K sterling. We did that to basically build out this idea of looking at Fusey as this then horizontal play, figuring out whether it had legs, getting those initial customers on board that we talked about, and basically tried to prove out the model. We did that, reasonably quickly and effectively, thankfully. And we were also in kind of that glorious era for founders, which was kind of the peak ZERP, money is everywhere kind of environment. So what that meant was there were more funding opportunities at that time than probably any other time that I've seen in my career. So it was very attractive to be able to kind of get into the market and let's just start having conversations around kind of how we can scale. The reason why we wanted to raise capital fundamentally is, remember, 5 years ago, we didn't have all of the same tools that we might have today in terms of, so many automations that make go to market and to make product development, frankly, that much more, effective and efficient. We needed some capital to get that going. And then I think the second piece was we knew that that would unlock opportunities for us to really test things at scale, right? So at the time, we saw early traction. We kind of accumulated a great, interesting team of people from all over, all different chapters of my life, different chapters of Henrik's life, and then of course people we were able to kind of convince to give this a shot. But ultimately, that kind of follow-on capital was going to be what would make a bigger opportunity or a bigger business happen. All that said, we didn't really go out into the market and do a formal fundraise. We were preempted. We had 5 founders who actually led our last round get in touch with us, and I think they were really interested in the broader kind of opportunity of SMB SaaS and what we could kind of do for frankly all of Europe's small business ecosystem, because that was obviously a pretty key focus at the time. And they were, they were kind of sold on the vision and came in to lead that round. Of course, after that, we spoke with a couple other parties, but we had a great relationship with their partner team, and wanted to go with that. So that's kind of how we thought about it at the time. I think transparently today, there's so many other funding mechanisms and options for young founders, which of course we could talk about. That I think maybe perhaps the calculus between VC and bootstrap kind of changes a little bit depending on what we're trying to do. But I'm deeply grateful to everybody who's backed us from the earliest times, and I think it was a great stepping stone for us to be able to kind of prove this out and get into everything else that we've done in the meantime, right? In terms of verticalizing, really investing in a team. We were able to hire engineers that there's no way we would have been able to convince to join us on a bootstrap basis. So as with anything, that there's nuance to it, but fundamentally, I think it's been a great journey.
And how much of those investors, both the ones for your pre-seed round and your seed round, been actively involved in shaping the business, maybe regular communication? How has that relationship worked for you guys?
Yeah, yeah. So maybe to walk you through kind of who joined as kind of investors in our business. Our pre-seed fund or pre-seed round was led by Global Founders Capital. At the time, they had a pre-seed arm called Flash Ventures, but it was owned by GFC. And then our main seed round was led by founders, but also participated with GFC as well as Ascension. And then we had two kind of high impact angels, Stefan Kurgan and Shiel Tile. I would say that in terms of our ongoing kind of engagement with our investors, it's been great. We have quarterly board meetings. We have very regular touch points with our board and associated advisors, both from a kind of a practical, corporate governance perspective of keeping them apprised of what's going on. But also, I think the intangibles have been really helpful as well, right? Just kind of having somebody in your corner whom you can kind of always go to and ask questions to. For recruiting, it's been great. I mean, Sarah, who's the lead partner, who led our last round, has been really helpful in terms of kind of providing that extra oomph to get somebody comfortable to join our story and get going. I think, there's the other intangibles, right? I mean, I think people too often don't talk about how brutally difficult it is to start a new business and to grow something, right? And it's been really helpful for them to not only kind of share their experiences and their ups and the downs, as investors and otherwise, but also connect us with their broader LP base, which is, kind of comprised of so many founders who have been on our journey as well. By Founders is unique in that sense. They have a really strong emphasis on kind of the community element of the fund. So they'll bring us together once a year in person, and then a couple of different times virtually to be able to have those tough conversations of saying, wow, it's been really brutal. And in this, have you seen that or something like that, right? And I think there's a real catharsis that comes from just knowing that other people have gone through it as well, particularly when those people have been really successful, prominent exited founders where you can say, okay, well, it's not just me that felt, really, lost in this moment. Other people have too, and they've gone on to do great things.
And you mentioned earlier that one of the big challenges that you had was the technical side of the business, getting the right people in. What have been your biggest challenges in Fuzey to date?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's probably different chapters, right? The earliest chapter was kind of getting through people's doors and trying to convince them to take a shot on something that was no more than kind of a PowerPoint, right? I look back on those things and I'm just like, I'm amazed that we were able to even have the conversations we did. It took a lot of hustle and a lot of grit, and I'm proud of what we did. That said, it was really hard. I mean, the number of people who have, politely or otherwise declined a conversation with me or my team, is in the, I'd have to say, the hundreds of thousands at this point, right? Just because obviously that's the nature of the game. But I think early on, finding our voice, finding our feet with that kind of initial horizontal concept was challenging. It happened, but it was challenging. Building the team and having kind of a continuity there when there was so much uncertainty around kind of what tomorrow would look like, particularly even up to the pre-seed, we had enough capital to hire people and we were always been very transparent about where we were at. But, you would hire people with the hope and the expectation that we'd be able to raise that follow-on round. But nothing in life is certain, right? So you basically have to convince somebody to leave. As an example, our head of engineering comes from TransferWise. He walked away from a great job and a great package, and he joined us. I'm super grateful for that. But was it challenging to kind of not only source but also convince great talent to join us when that happened? Of course, it's incredibly hard. And I think there's kind of the kind of getting into the next kind of phase was making the hard decision to verticalize, right? I mean, I think in a lot of ways that horizontal story is so sexy as a founder where you say, okay, I have this massive world, I'm going to dominate everything. But a little tougher to kind of, say, hey, look, I'm just going to look at this one particular, niche. Now, I think when we first started talking about this and thinking about it, we were a little bit, perhaps pessimistic in a way where we said, look, how is this really going to affect, the broader market that we can affect and the number of people that we can impact? But, what I realized in kind of retrospect, our vertical focus didn't really narrow our TAM, but rather it gave us a wedge to dominate one, right? And I think that's actually been, in a funny way, one of the hardest decisions we've made, but one of the most empowering ones, because rather than kind of being takers in every kind of environment, we're able to more effectively kind of make that kind of make that future for us, for lack of a better term. So yeah, I mean, those are kind of the immediate kind of like, challenges by chapter, I'd say. But I think the more existential one that kind of permeates everything is the classic like founder imposter syndrome, right? Because there's no playbook for this. Nobody knows, how it's done. I think you're super confident once your confidence levels kind of ebb and flow in the journey. And in some ways, I feel exceptionally confident about where we're at, what we're doing. I think our business is performing super well. We've been really lucky, and we can talk about this in a bit, but we've been really lucky that we're just at this kind of nice confluence of time where people are engaging and messaging in different ways. AI is exploding in a way that even I had no idea when we first started this business, and it's worked really well for us. Of course, I think you make your own luck and you make your own destiny, but at the same time, you have to be lucky as well. And anytime that you kind of lean on luck, there's a lot of pieces of you that naturally say, do I really know what's going on? Do I know how it works? And I think that's probably true for everybody in every job. But when you stand in front of your investors or your team, it makes it that much scarier to kind of admit that you don't always know what's going on. But I will say, in 5 years, that's something that I've started to do much more. I mean, obviously we have a direction. Obviously we have, a pretty good sense of what we want to do. But equally, I think the humility that accompanies or that's gained or beaten into you, depending on how you look at it, uh, in 5 years of growing a company is kind of leaves you with a sense that we're all kind of figuring it out together.
What's been the most surprising thing in the journey so far? Whether that's a positive thing or not so much.
Good question. I think what's been surprising is how perhaps what I should have said a little bit earlier is we founded this company in the UK, right? We founded it in the UK with an initial focus on the UK and Ireland. Within a year or two, we started focusing on other adjacent markets, so continental Europe a little bit. My founder was Danish, as an example, so we looked basically at their small areas to kind of pick off. I'm American. We started talking about, with customers in the US. And most recently in December, I moved over to Dubai to build out our kind of golf footprint. What's been surprising to me is that, challenges across all of our customers are actually quite universal. A lot of our customers are dealing with the same things, but the way that they think about, fixing it is fundamentally different, right? As I've seen, our customers in the UK and the Gulf as an example, kind of compare, they're using so much the same tech. They're using so many of the same processes. A lot of the automotive leaders here in the Gulf actually have come from the UK, so there's a lot of kind of cultural crossover. But the way that things are thought about and the way that new innovation is thought about is almost entirely different, right? So rather than I think here in the Gulf, people are very opportunistic and thinking much more about kind of like where the opportunities are. I think in the UK, I've seen a lot more thinking about how we're going to use tech to address challenges, both of which are great. There's no problem on either side. But I think it's the surprise in all of this for me has been it's really demanded a very different type of, language positioning and kind of ethos for what is fundamentally the same product in multiple different markets, but the way that you engage with people is so different. Ultimately, when you're building something new and you're selling, this is a people-oriented game, right? You need to kind of have empathy and respect and knowledge of the people that you're serving. And I think, as I look back, I probably didn't initially think enough about how much that would kind of differ on a regional basis. But perhaps that's the American in me, being a little bit less attuned to that stuff than I should have initially.
Speaking of which, tell us about your story. I know from LinkedIn you have lived everywhere: India, UK, San Francisco, all over now Dubai.
Yeah.
How have you kind of created this whirlwind global career? Where did you sort of start and what's been the journey to get where you are now?
Yeah, I think it's a very kind way of saying it. I'm just perpetually confused, I guess. So yeah, no. Look, I grew up in Washington D.C. I always had kind of an interesting life outside of the U.S. and kind of what the world looked like. From my earliest memories, I was fortunate to have opportunities to travel outside the U.S. and see parts of the world, and I said I wanted to see more of that. In college, I wrote my thesis on renewable energy development in Brazil, India, and China. Did a lot of research and interviews with kind of politicians and also kind of business people and industrialists in those nations. One of which was an individual named Anna Mahindra, and he was kind enough to basically give me a job after I interviewed him in my senior year of college. I think he was kind of intrigued that there was some random American that was kind of keen to learn more about his renewable energy business in India, and he asked me to come on board. I worked with him for about 2.5, 3 years in India, and then towards the later part of that in San Francisco, working on his renewable energy and kind of clean tech practice. So built out a solar business with him and his team, and then worked on a two-wheeled electric vehicle concept in the Bay Area as well. It was an amazing way to start a career. Like there's, I think, no better way to learn as an individual than to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And I can tell you very confidently that this was extremely out of my comfort zone. Where you kind of land up in a new market where you need to relearn everything: how to go get groceries, how to get to work, how to engage at the office. And I mean, we talked a minute ago about kind of cultural nuances and thinking differently about sales. this is the kind of thing that preps you for that, right? Because you kind of have to learn how to engage and manage and be managed in different contexts. So started there. I then realized that I wanted to kind of get a little bit more structure and kind of, I don't know, classic professional services experience to kind of round out, how I thought about business and the world. So I went to business school and then joined Morgan Stanley, where I did tech investment banking for, I guess, about 3 or 4 years. Had a great time there. Worked with some incredible clients. Helped raise capital for late stage tech in Europe. Helped IPO ventures in the region as well. And then, of course, did probably the majority of my work was in and around M&A. And what that meant is I worked with really high quality founders on like the most important moments in their journey, right? These are the moments where they say, okay, I've worked for years on this particular thing. This is my moment to tell my story to public investors or to raise more capital or to, acquire or divest my company. Um, and that was an inspiring kind of, lens through which to understand how they thought. After that chapter, I realized that I wanted to get back into operating, because I missed that piece. And ultimately, I wanted to be on the other side of that table. So I joined a Series A, now Series B, North Zone company. Called Disperse. They do a really interesting, offer a really interesting platform within construction where we're really early in the game of using AI and machine learning to track progress. So you would walk through a building site with a camera and track week to week how that project was progressing as per their schedule. And obviously there was a ton of different value adds that come with that, right? In terms of how you pay for a project and providing comfort and security to developers, all sorts of stuff. But ultimately joined them on that journey for just over a year, helped them kind of get them to that next point through COVID. And I can tell you all these horror stories about working in construction in the UK during COVID, but that's not why we're here today. And I won't bore you with that, but it was a brutal and eye-opening process. But I was delighted and really proud of the team and what we did. Right, we were able to build that business, almost triple it in about a year, and that kind of gave me the conviction to be able to do something of my own. So that led me to Fuzey, which again founded in 2020. Um, and I think there it was this confluence of seeing different markets and how customers engaged. Right, going all the way back to India days, WhatsApp has been huge from kind of the earliest moment, to thinking about, how mobility works and how mobility centric customers work, which was in San Francisco. Obviously, the technology piece, we worked with a number of great companies, of which WhatsApp was one while I was at the firm. And then I think it just kind of brought me back to the basics where, my mom has a small business. A lot of the reason why we started it initially on a horizontal level is that we worked with her and her spa. This is something I've been helping her with for years. I didn't know it was going to take us in the automotive direction, but in a funny way, it all made sense because these are the same fundamental challenges, but perhaps the scale of the challenge for an automotive dealership that might employ 50 people or 100 people might be a little bit greater than my mom's one person shop. Not to say that one has more relevance or value or worth, but certainly from kind of an immediate commercial perspective, it's been a little bit easier to build there. So that's kind of how that story went for me. For my co-founder, Henrik, I mean, he's kind of worked in and around, mobility adjacent businesses from day one. So this was a much more of a slam dunk for him. He worked at Line 10 before this, which is a kind of a local logistics firm. And then, before that was at Bolt, where he was kind of the first director of international for them. So which is obviously a hugely successful ride hailing company here in Europe. So in any way, in any case, I mean, basically, it's been a meandering path, but I think one that's been really great. And I think a lot about that in terms of kind of that different kind of view and path. I think it's very easy to come out of university and say, or out of anything and say, you kind of want to go on kind of a very linear journey that allows you to, if you do this, delivers this, to get you, to that. But at the same time, I kind of reflect on the choices I've made, and I realized that, it hasn't been a linear path by any stretch of the imagination, but it's been a really fulfilling one. And I think it's made me a better thinker and a better founder. and I'm grateful for it.
What a journey. That's just such an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. And so in terms of Fusey, you guys have been building the organization. You talked a little bit about being on the other side of the desk with M&A. What do you think the future holds for Fusey in the long term?
The $1 million question. Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a number of different things that we've, kind of thought about. I think the first thing to say is that, where we might differ from where we were a couple of years ago is we have kind of the power in our hands, right? We are fortunate to be in a position where we're default alive. So if if we need to be profitable tomorrow, we can be. We've continued to kind of double down on our, investment in our product and kind of different testing because we're in kind of a position of strength here. But I think the biggest thing that keeps me sleeping well at night is that fact, right? So of course, as with any business, there's a couple different options. We can kind of keep growing on an independent basis. We can grow and raise additional capital, which is certainly something that we've thought about, but we would like to do it at kind of the best possible time for our business, our product, and our customers. But I think there we would probably invest much more heavily on kind of the AI side of the business, which I think we should talk about, because it's obviously so relevant in so many minds right now. Um, and then of course there's a bunch of different great partners in the ecosystem that I'm sure we could be great partners for as well. I mean, we integrate with a number of different, great technology companies that a lot of which are private equity backed and highly acquisitive. So naturally, I think that that's always either a joke or a question that comes from the customers that we serve as well. So I think there's a bunch of different options there. As you can tell, we're very much in the mode of kind of thinking about everything, but we've got a long term view here. I mean, I think that we're in the earliest innings of the story. We are really delivering huge value to our customers. Perhaps for the first time that I can really look in the mirror and say, I know that each and every customer that's using us in our full product suite is really transforming the way that they're working. So therefore, why would you want to put your pen down right now? A longer answer than what you were looking for, but that's kind of how we're thinking about that strategic question.
And you mentioned the AI piece. What's the big kind of background on that for you guys?
Sure. So, as I said up front, what Fusey does is we help connect customers to dealerships through a variety of different channels. If you think about it from kind of a customer lifecycle perspective, we start with leads and we end with after sales. So we can really support every single touch point in that journey. Now, dealerships today have everybody takes kind of a slightly different approach, but fundamentally are pretty people heavy organizations. So there's always going to be somebody who's triaging a lead and talking to anybody who's submitted information or interest in a particular vehicle. So there'll then be a salesperson responsible for selling that car, and then another relationship manager or service manager that's going to be responsible for managing the ongoing maintenance of said car and so on and so forth. So a lot of different people as part of the puzzle. What we use AI to do is help automate a lot of those kind of more, you know, um, regular and common interactions. So what does that mean? That means ongoing service reminders. That means querying and kind of triaging any basic questions around vehicles from a sales perspective or an after sales perspective. But what we can do with AI, which I think is what kind of most interesting, is we can help make people do their jobs better. So, as an example, we integrate with Keyloop, which is a DMS provider, which is a kind of a dealer management service that helps you basically capture all customer and vehicle related information for a particular dealership. Now, with that information, what we can do is we can feed that through our system and provide a really robust picture of who a customer is. So Natalie, if you're driving a 3 Series as an example, and you're suddenly thinking about maybe upgrading to a 5 Series, what I can do is I can help give you or give the salesperson serving you a really interesting picture of exactly who you are, what you might want, right? I know that you're married, you've got a child. I can say, okay, feed that into the platform and say that this is a 3 Series owner who has a family who might be thinking about, upgrading. Here's different selling propositions to get this over the line, right? I can provide a picture that is just fundamentally different than anything that would be, kind of jotted down or in somebody's memory from years ago. These are the ways that we're really using AI. And these are really highly monetizable for both us and our customers, right? Our customers say, okay, you can help me sell more vehicles or sell more services more efficiently. And for us, of course, what that means is we can really deliver something super interesting from a kind of commercial perspective for our dealer partners as well.
Listen, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I appreciated the conversation and, look forward to speaking soon.
That's it for this episode of Tech Startup Stories. Have a story you'd like us to share or a topic you'd want to cover? Reach out and we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care.